I ranked 5 major AI chatbots on privacy: Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, and Grok. And the surprise was not who won, it was that they all failed. No one in this class got 1A, B, or even a C. Big AI didn't compete on privacy. All these companies converged on a low bar with different branding. Hi, I'm Kate, attorney and certified privacy professional, and apparently the kind of person who reads privacy policies so you don't have to. Welcome to Sunshine&Side-AIs, where we break down AI privacy and ethics so you actually understand what you agree into. Quick disclaimer before we dive in. This is for educational purposes only, not legal advice. I'm sharing research, not giving counsel. Because if you use these tools for work, brainstorming, life stuff, emotional oversharing, or you chat about whether you should quit your job and move abroad, you should probably know what kind of deal you're actually making. With that, let's get into it. I scored Claude, ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini, and Grok against a privacy by design rubric. 6 categories, 30 points maximum. I even have 3 different AI systems independently score the same source documents using the same rubric. They disagreed on the exact rankings, they all agreed on the letter grade. Every single chatbot failed based on that rubric. At this point, I'm convinced that the entire consumer industry held a group retreat and decided that privacy by design just wasn't the vibe. And here's the part that surprised even me. I expected to find a winner. I expected at least one company, maybe the one that markets itself as safety first option, to separate from the pack. Well, that didn't happen. What I found instead was convergence. 5 companies with different brands, different business models, different public reputations, all landed in the same low privacy neighborhood. The exact scores are judgment calls, but the convergence pattern is not. Kind of disappointing, but this video is not really a story about one good chatbot and 4 bad ones. It's a story about a consumer AI market that settled into the same weak privacy bargain and what that means for you. So how did I score this? I use privacy by design principles as my guidance, a framework that embeds data protection into the development of technology from the outset, rather than an afterthought. In plain English, I was trying to imagine if any of these companies were actually building privacy in by default, what would that look like? 6 categories, each scored 0 to 5, 30 points possible. I want to walk you through them quickly so you can understand what good looks like and perhaps notice exactly where every single one of these companies made the same choices. Category 1, collection minimization. How much data are they collecting and how much do they actually need? A 5 means essential only. A 0 means they're vacuuming up everything they can get. 2, retention and deletion. Once they have your data, how long do they keep it? A 5 means clear timelines and fast deletion. A 0 means vague language and indefinite retention. 3, training defaults and controls. Are your conversations training their AI? Did you choose that or was it chosen for you? A 5 means no training by default. 0 means training is on, the opt-out is buried, and the carve-outs significantly limit the control. 4, third-party sharing. Who else gets your data? A 5 means tight sharing with a clear vendor list, no ad partners. A 0 means your data is flowing in directions you can't track. 5, users' rights and opt-outs. Can you actually control your information? A 5 means strong rights with easy controls. A 0 means you're shouting into a void. And 6, red flags. A kind of a catch-all category for red flags. The terms buried somewhere in the pages of dry and boring text that make privacy lawyers' eye twitch. A 5 means no surprises. A 0 means the terms read like a privacy horror movie. I will be honest with you. A 5 in every category is a high standard, but not impossible. Unfortunately, that is not what this market looks like now. What this market looks like is broad collection, training by default, or carve-outs that survive the opt-out. Deletion rights with exceptions everywhere and privacy settings that exist mostly so companies can say the settings exist. Let's talk about data collection. Once I stopped obsessing over the tiny score differences, the pattern got very obvious. All five chatbots use some version of the same three bucket model. Bucket 1, data you submit. Your prompts, uploads, files, feedback. You typed it in, they have it. Bucket 2, data they observe. Device info, IP address, usage patterns, browser, time zone, cookies. You didn't hand this over, they collected it in the background. And bucket 3, data they pull from somewhere else. Third party sources, adjacent ecosystems, publicly available data, and depending on the company, a lot more than that. Please keep in mind that every company does all three. The real difference is how wide the funnel gets. ChatGPT collects prompts, uploads, usage data, device data, and in some flows, even your contact list. Claude collects the usual prompts and technical data, plus market and cookie data, and what Anthropic calls probabilistic identifiers, a phrase that sounds like it should come with a warning label. Copilot sits inside the broader Microsoft ecosystem, and Grok is wired into X. And then there is Gemini. Gemini doesn't just collect what you type, it's wired into Google's broader ecosystem. Search history, YouTube history, Chrome page context. On mobile, it collects call and message logs, contacts, installed apps, screen content, and even smart home device context. And here is a detail no other chatbot has to deal with. Gemini can activate accidentally. Google's own privacy notice says it may activate when you didn't intend. A noise that sounds like, "Hey Google." And that input gets treated like a normal interaction. That's not a chatbot collecting your data, that's a chatbot overhearing your data. Gemini is subjectively the only zero on the entire scorecard, and it's in this category. It's not really a chatbot with a big data appetite, it's a system level assistant with access to basically everything on your device and across your Google account. But don't let that make the others look good by comparison. They're all collecting from all three buckets. Gemini just has a bigger bucket 3 than anyone else. Now let's move on to model training. Here's the pattern. Every single consumer chatbot trains on your conversations by default. You are opted in the moment you start using it. Every one of them offers an opt-out. And every single opt-out comes with carve-outs that weaken what it actually does. You toggle off training? Great. But if your conversation gets flagged for safety review, it can still be used. If it's already been incorporated into a model, it stays. If it gets processed in a de-identified or anonymized form, that continues too. And nobody publishes the methodology for how they de-identify or anonymize. But the carve out I want you to remember is the one nobody talks about, the feedback trap. On most of these platforms, and this is documented clearly for Claude, Gemini, and Grok, clicking thumbs up or thumbs down can route that conversation into training or extended retention, even if your training toggle is off. At Anthropic, that conversation gets stored for 5 years. At Google, it's up to 3 years. And it gets disconnected from your account, which means you can't delete it even if you want to. Grok explicitly says feedback can override your opt-out. Across several platforms, and likely most of this group, feedback creates a carve-out or extended review or retention pathway. I didn't find any clear policy disclosure saying users are warned at the moment they click feedback. You think you're helping improve a bad answer? You're actually overriding your own privacy settings. This is the single most universal and poorly explained pattern I found across all 5 chatbots. Now, let's talk about retention, because this is where the policies get especially slippery. Almost all of these companies start with some version of the same baseline language. As long as reasonably necessary, as long as we need, or ongoing legitimate business need. These are the retention equivalents of "it depends." Maximum flexibility for the company, not as much clarity for you. On top of that big baseline, the layer specific timelines for selected data. Copilot auto-deletes conversation after 18 months, the most concrete commitment in the group. Google lets you choose 3, 18, or 36 months. But human reviewed chats stick around for up to 3 years and you can't delete them because they are disconnected from your account. Anthropic's feedback retention runs 5 years, safety scores 7. OpenAI relies on the same vague baseline with broad exceptions. Grok is the loosest on retention transparency. Deleted chats, private chat conversations, and deleted accounts come off XAI system within 30 days. But standard account data can stick around as long as XAI says it has an ongoing business need. And legal safety or de-identified data can stay longer with no stated maximum. Even where Grok gives you a number, the exceptions are doing a lot of the work. So you get these pockets of specificity that make the policy feel transparent. But underneath all of them, the vague baseline is always there is a catch-all. Every single company carves out exceptions for legal holds, safety, compliance, and de-identified data, which can be kept longer and in some cases with no user visible maximum. Also, de-identified doesn't mean deleted. The best way I can describe it, they're being bureaucratically honest. They're telling you exactly how they're keeping your data for a long time. That's transparency. It's just not good retention. And this is where the phrase privacy theater fits perfectly. Every company now knows it needs a delete button, a dashboard, a toggle, an export tool, a private mode. The problem is that these controls often do not match the power of the carve out sitting behind them. Here is the sharpest example I found. Microsoft Copilot has a model training toggle. You turn it off, you think you've opted out. But the fine print says, and I want you to hear this clearly, opting out of model training doesn't exclude your conversation from use for other general product or system improvements, or for advertising, digital safety, security, and compliance purposes. So what exactly did you opt out of? The controls are real enough to put on a setting page, real enough to market, but they often don't control what you think they control. So that's the playbook. Collect broadly, train by default, retain vaguely, and offer controls that look better than they work. Now, does anyone actually break from the pack? Sort of, but probably not in the way you would expect. 3 of the 5, Claude, ChatGPT, and Copilot, scored between 11 and 12 out of 30. Basically tied, but that's still enough. At this point, the bar is low enough that the things they do right are worth naming. Claude earned its points by being the least ecosystem invasive of the group. No ads in the product, a genuine incognito mode that keeps conversations completely out of training. It honors global privacy control signals. And there is no forced arbitration clause for consumers, meaning if something goes wrong, you can actually go to court. That's not universal in this group. ChatGPT has one of the more user manageable control sets in the group. Training opt out, temporary chat, memory management, add data deletion, more individual knobs to turn than any other platform. It offers self service data export and a relatively straightforward privacy portal. Copilot stands out on retention and training exclusions. The 18th month auto deleting on conversations is still the most concrete retention commitment in the group. The training exclusion list is broad. Under 18 users, unauthenticated users, Microsoft 365 subscribers, and users in several countries are excluded by default. But Copilot is also a perfect example of how fast these policies move. When I started this research in February, Microsoft support materials said opting out excluded past, present, and future conversations from training. The privacy control page now says only future conversation activities are excluded. The exclusions stay. The scope got narrower. So why do they still fail? Because the shared playbook underneath, broad collection, default on training, vague retention baselines, carve-outs that survive every toggle, is the same. These 3 earned a few extra points by doing specific things better. They didn't escape the pattern. And if I spend the next hour doing 5 separate company monologues, this video would become a snooze fest. So here are the only differences that actually deserve real airtime. The biggest differentiator is not data collection or retention or training defaults, it's advertising. The consumer AI market is split into two camps: chatbots with ads and chatbots without them. And if you watched what happened to social media, search, and streaming, you already know where this is heading. Copilot has the deepest advertising integration. Microsoft is the ad network. Microsoft's advertising materials describe conversational, context aware ad experiences in Copilot. And Copilot checkout lets users buy products without leaving the chat. Conversation to add to purchase, all in one window. Microsoft reports 73% higher click through rates in Copilot versus traditional search. That tells you why this isn't going away. ChatGPT crossed into advertising in February 2026. Ad personalization on by default for free and Go users in the US. Purchase data flowing in from advertisers. And Sam Altman's statements on ads went from uniquely unsettling to mission aligned accessibility in about 18 months. If that trajectory sounds familiar, it's because it's the exact same arc at every major ad supported tech company. Claude has no ads in the product. Anthropic even runs Super Bowl ads making fun of chatbots that do. You might have seen one where a guy asks a chatbot how to talk to his mom and gets pitched a cougar dating site. The tagline: ads are coming to AI, but not to Claude. Funny, effective. Even regular consumers, not just developers, started talking about Claude. But here's the thing: Claude AI still runs marketing cookies from Meta, TikTok, Reddit, X, LinkedIn, and Google. So this is not some pristine anti-ad monastery in the woods. Your usage patterns, not your conversation content, but the fact that you are using Claude, when and how, are visible to those ad platforms. Ad-free is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that tagline. Grok is harder to slot cleanly into the ad split. XAI FAQ says it doesn't sell user data or share it for marketing or advertising purposes, but the same company's privacy policy, updated on April 2026, says cookie data may be used to deliver relevant content and targeted advertising. And XAI's cookies policy lists targeting cookies from Meta, Google, X, and TikTok on Grok.com. One company, three documents, two different answers. Gemini is currently ad-free, but Google's Privacy Hub includes the most carefully hatched sentence in any of these policies. Your Gemini app's chats are not being used to show you ads. If this changes, we will clearly communicate it to you. That's not a commitment, that's a reservation. When the company that runs the world's largest advertising business says if this changes, the question isn't if, it's when. The ad-free consumer chatbot is becoming a rarity. And ads don't just change the business model, they change the data incentives. Once a company monetizes attention, every retention period has a financial reason to get longer, and every opt-out has a business case to get weaker. Now let me preface this. Every one of these companies, and I do mean every one of them, has clauses that made me stop and reread. ChatGPT. Connect your contacts, and OpenAI uploads your entire address book, identifies which contacts use the service, and notifies you when non-users sign up. Your mom, your dentist, your ex, if they're in your phone and your connected contacts, OpenAI has them. That's a social media growth tactic showing up in a chatbot. Copilot. Microsoft's terms say that unless prohibited by law, they may limit, suspend, or permanently revoke your access to Copilot and potentially all other Microsoft services in their sole discretion at any time and without notice. They do give examples like breach, fraud, illegal activity, or a suspended account. But the clause is still broad enough that one Copilot enforcement decision could spill into your wider Microsoft account. Claude. Anthropic reserves the right at their sole discretion to report your inputs, outputs, or actions to law enforcement. No warrant, no subpoena, sole discretion. Most companies say they'll comply with legal process. Anthropic says they can initiate it. Gemini. Chats selected for human review are retained up to 3 years, disconnected from your account so you cannot delete them. Google doesn't clearly explain in its policies and FAQs how individual users are notified, if at all. And then there's Grok. Every company on this list has problems, but Grok's terms are in a different category. Start with the structure. Grok is the only chatbot governed by two separate privacy regimes: XAI's policy on Grok.com and X's policies inside the X app. XAI calls itself a separate company from X despite owning it. Why does it matter? Because X's terms explicitly license public posts for AI training, including for machine learning models. X's own help page says the way to stop it is to change your settings or make your entire account private. That's not a realistic opt out, and XAI knows it. On top of that, XAI's consumer terms grant an irrevocable perpetual license to use your content for any purpose. Irrevocable means it survives account deletion. For any purpose means exactly what it says. Most other chatbots grant themselves broad licenses, but Grok's is the only one that's explicitly irrevocable. And the terms include a usage data ownership assignment, not a license, an assignment. You are transferring ownership of your usage patterns and interaction data to XAI. All of that would be enough, but it's worth noting that Grok's image generation feature was at the center of a major non-consensual intimate imagery crisis that triggered investigations from 35 state attorneys general and regulators in multiple countries. A company's response to that kind of crisis tells you something about its values. And XAI's response was widely regarded as inadequate. So, after all of that, what do you actually do? You're not going to stop using AI chatbots. I'm not going to stop using them. But there are a few things you can do right now that meaningfully reduce your exposure. You can turn off model training on every chatbot you use. Yes, the opt-out has carve-outs, but it's still better than leaving it on. You can use private or incognito modes for anything sensitive. Claude, ChatGPT, and Gemini all have some sort of incognito or temporary chat option. They're not bulletproof, but they keep conversations out of training pipelines and long-term storage and retention, absent any carve-outs, of course. Don't give feedback on sensitive conversations. On most of these platforms, the thumbs up or down click can route your conversations into training or longer retention, even if you've opted out. If it's personal, skip the feedback button. You can keep sensitive topics of these platforms entirely. Legal questions, health concerns, financial details. These tools are not confidential. Treat them accordingly. None of this fixes the underlying problem, but it buys you some breathing room while the industry figures out whether privacy is something they actually want to build or just something they want to market. The reason all five chatbots converge on the same low bar is not because they copied each other's homework. I think that the main reason is because the United States has no comprehensive federal privacy law, and the patchwork of state laws creates a floor. And these companies have landed exactly on it. These products are not a radical break from how American consumer tech has always worked. They're the next phase of it. Same bargain. Notice plus settings, defaults favoring the company, deletion rights with exceptions everywhere, ad ecosystems creeping in. The only difference is that the inputs are more intimate and the use case is more sensitive than anything that came before. And until federal and state regulation catches up to the current state of technology, the best you can do is understand what you are agreeing to and make deliberate choices about what you share. If you want AI coverage with actual receipts, clear explanations, and a healthy level of suspicion about shady data practices, subscribe to Sunshine&Side-AIs. They gave us dashboards, toggles, and a whole lot of fingers crossed that everything will work out in our favor. I wanted privacy by design, not privacy by scavenger hunt.